Hi there. I'm Christopher Burgess, the host of Conversations from the Inside. And insider risk management is not a challenge limited to the insiders, nor is it something that technology can solve in isolation. In many ways, insider risk management is the only realm of cybersecurity that successfully merges psychology with technology to solve what is fundamentally a human challenge. In this episode, we'll be dissecting the recently released Insider Risk Investigation Report, Foreign Influence, with the DTEX team. Today, joining me will be those from DTEX with expertise and knowledge behind this report. We have Raj Koo, Chief Technology Officer, Armin Mahbod, Director, Security and Business Intelligence, and Lindsay Wolf, I3 Investigation Team Lead. Raj, introduce your team, please.
Hey guys, Chris, thank you very much for having me. Obviously, we've done a number of sessions on this. This is actually the seventh insider risk report that we've produced. So every year, Arman and Lindsay's teams work with a number of different customers in helping insider threat investigations, working through our platform and the findings that come out, and kind of triaging alerts. And every year we summarize all of the different aspects of the risks and the trends that we're seeing. Now, part of this year, and the reason why we've called this a special edition related to foreign interference, is really around the number of requests that we've had, especially for our critical infrastructure organizations, around this specific topic. So I'd preface that, we are not experts in foreign interference. We're experts in understanding the activity and the actions of insiders and their usage of corporate applications. So, I'd love to introduce Arman Mahbod, who leads our I3 function. Arman, do you think you'd be able to give a bit of an overview of the I3 function? And then I'd love to pass that to Lindsay to talk about the investigations team as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's a lot of combination of research from what we're seeing in the public, obviously what we're seeing from our customer base and the feedback we're getting from their industry specific identifications that they're making in their investigations, as well as just broad strokes, and feeding that back into our intelligence that essentially helps our customers handle identifying risk and malicious incidents in their organizations.
Yeah, and so, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is a lot of stuff that we've communicated with our customers. Myself works, face-to-face with customers every day. We're talking about insider risk and how they can approach it in their organizations, and what they're concerned about kind of moving forward. And as Raj said, this is a topic that we've been asked about on multiple occasions, like the best way to identify it, the best way to go about combating it, and what the future holds for it as well. So I get to work with customers in many different industries, and it's a lot of fun to be able to kind of rework different use cases depending on the industry that the customers are in. So the team that I work with are looking at a lot of different data points, and it's a great example of how we can kind of collaborate and work together amongst the different organizations and industries that we have in order to better understand the way moving forward for this specific topic.
Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to remind the audience viewing us today that you can send across your questions in the chat, and we'll be answering them at the end of our discussion here today. Raj, this report isn't the run-of-the-mill data share. There's meat on the bone here. And as Lindsay and Armin just articulated, while it's hyper interesting because there's so much interest, and who doesn't like to do work that has meaning and immediate meaning because people are asking for it. Could you introduce the report in some depth, and then we'll dig into the salient portions?
Yeah, so the report, we cover a number of different industries. So, one of the things, and the team, hopefully there's a link the team have already started to kind of download, and those listening in online as well. But we cover predominantly 5 different kind of sectors within DTEX, and we look at the areas of monitoring across our US customer base. We look at our EMEA customer base as well, and we call it APAC, but that's largely Australia and Southeast Asia. But predominantly the data set from this report has come from our US customers, and it tends to be skewed a little bit towards the larger enterprise, and that's just a reflection of DTEX's customer base and typically critical infrastructure. So when we talk about critical infrastructure, we rely on CISA's definition. There's over 16 different kind of sectors
Sure.
of critical infrastructure. Obviously, the early adopters of DTEX's technology tended to be the banking industry, and that tended to be the industry that had more budget for these types of toolings. And we've seen that kind of flow through with the likes of telecommunications companies, the energy sector, pharmaceuticals, semiconductor companies, and things like that. So that's really expanded now to the wider critical infrastructure set. So the data set that we use is really how our i3 team, and in particular Lindsay's team of investigators, how they've gone through and helped customers triage alerts. And we're often inferred the responses that those customers took. So we might not always be the first responders to these incidents, but the data set in aggregate is the actions that were taken really throughout 2023. So we're really looking at a 2023 data set, and we have looked at some of the early trends that we've seen in the first few months of this year, and those have been incorporated in the report as well. And so, we do take into account some of the public available incidents that also might not relate to DTEX as well,
Sure.
as they're pertinent and support some of the things that we're finding inside our customers that we can't necessarily talk to because of confidentiality reasons.
I find in my writing that it's helpful to share other people's experiences, even if they're not your own, so that one may learn from the MO used. And that's our segue to, as you call it, the rise of social engineering. In the Poneman report, which DTEX sponsored, we talked about employees being fooled, being taken advantage of, not understanding what was going on in their engagement. And in your report, you talk in some depth about the modus operandi that we've seen in the use by nation states in the use of commercial cover, social networks engagement, and it's all to dupe an individual and to think that they are dealing with an entity. But those who are steeped in social engineering will say social engineering is to get somebody to do something that they otherwise wouldn't do if they were following policy and procedure. Let's talk about what you're finding in your investigations in social engineering, because you say you've got a sharp rise in this.
Yeah, and maybe I'll start off, and I'll probably pass this to you, Lindsay, as well, to kind of talk about, we've seen, especially, even at DTEX, even within our own insider threat program, the sophistication of the techniques that are being leveraged against our employee base has increased significantly. And part of this is the widespread availability of generative AI. And this has been obviously talked to death in the news, but we see the capabilities that are now within easy reach of our adversaries, and even unsophisticated adversaries as well, to socially engineer our user population has just gone through the roof. I wonder if you can talk to this, Lindsay. And in the report, I'm going to bring up a bit of a 2-page spread, which is kind of compares the risks and rewards specifically around AI and how that pertains to social engineering as well. But I'll pass the ball to you, Lindsay, and I'll share my screen now.
Yeah, so with the rise of the socially engineered insider, we have seen a lot of changes happening in this space. The main differences here is that, as technology is continuing to increase and be enhanced, we're seeing that what we think of as socially engineering is very different, and the way in which we're seeing it actually work is because of all of these advances in technology. So there has been a really sharp rise in the stealth and frequency of foreign interference as, state actors are weaponizing this technology to socially engineer trusted insiders. Prior to, the use of AI and these deep fake tools and things like that, we were told to look for certain mistakes in emails or kind of take note of, the differences in a text message or things like that. But these things aren't happening anymore. The reason being is because AI is being utilized to produce these emails and produce these text messages, which is becoming something that where it's harder and harder to identify, and even being able to train and educate our user population against it, because all of what we were taught prior is no longer, we can no longer apply it to our training for our users, because again, it's looking at it from a perspective of, you put something in AI and it produces your email for you. It's very unlikely that there is going to be, you know, that slight mistake that you notice, or that slight typo that you're looking for. So these are all the types of risks that we're kind of looking at here when we're looking at things like accidental or intentional data loss. Deep fakes and AI powered fraud is exactly what we're trying to focus on at this point, because it's becoming one of those problems that we're not sure how to train our users against it. But it's something that we're seeing more and more. There's a lot of use cases. I've been a part of a couple of different investigations involving deep fraud or deep fakes, where employees are pretending to be other people, or you join a Zoom call and you're talking with somebody, but the person you're talking to is not actually the person you're talking to. This idea of puppeteering and things like that. So it becomes one of these issues where how do we know? How do we tell, you know, what is real and what is not? And this is something that the nation states and foreign interference are leveraging. They're picking up on these things that, wow, we can use these tools to better, you know, have success stories with you know, tricking employees or gaining access and compromise. So that's where the risk is.
Well, the HR world for a number of years had a major problem of candidates that applied were not the candidates that took the test, that were not the candidate that took the interview. But now it seems with the rise of AI, that level of fraud can go even higher, because I now can use the face of the candidate that you want to place, but isn't the one you're interviewing. And so their lips are moving, but it's not his lips, it's somebody else's lips. Is that what you're describing?
Exactly. And that's something that
I just want to make sure that we draw a picture for it, albeit in words, that there is actual interaction taking place with AI puppets.
There is.
Individual can't distinguish.
And that, go ahead, Raj.
Yeah, no, and just to add to that one, Christopher, we've even experienced here at DTEX, you know, one of our individuals in payroll, her LinkedIn account, there was an individual that enrolled within DTEX's LinkedIn account, which was a completely fake profile. It looked exactly like the individual, and there was outreach by that individual to others inside our company, behaving and with a complete backstory that appeared to be that individual. And we've seen
you've been somebody used pretexting to try to access your network.
Yep.
Been around for 1,000 years, but I like to say what we're seeing here is the evolution of tradecraft by the miscreants and the adversarial parties, so that they're morphing as technology allows them to advance. And if we don't, those who are trying to protect data, protect people, protect assets, do not morph at their speed, then we are creating for ourselves a huge delta of risk and liability.
100%. And you hit on a point there, Christopher, which is really, really important. The technique itself is not new. The technology being applied to the technique has kind of increased the bar on how believable these things are. And that's, you know, from a DTEX perspective, we're often finding out about the intricacies of the event sometimes after the fact, and we're using our data set to go and see if other individuals in the organization were also approached by the same message, or how many other individuals could have been touched by this as well. And in particular, and this is where maybe Arman, I'd love to hear from your side too, where we've seen that if an individual is successfully socially engineered, and sometimes we're even seeing quite sophisticated people within the security team getting socially engineered where they wouldn't have been. From a DTEX data set point of view, and when we investigate these things, we often are identifying things as a potential compromised account, where the account is behaving in a way that is not akin to the normal user's behavior baseline. So we're often seeing these things slightly after the fact, but Arman, would you be able to just touch on some of the things that we've identified, in particular around living off the land attacks and things that we might be able to then exonerate individuals?
Yeah, it's been very interesting when somebody gets access into a business, an external threat actor, whether it's through phishing links, whether it's through somebody introducing it in another avenue. You start to see odd behaviors in what many people kind of ignore in businesses, because normally these are things that IT processes are triggering in the background as well, batch scripts and things of that nature. So, but there are a lot of the discovery part of MITRE ATT&CK, a lot of the initial phases of MITRE ATT&CK are actually quite interesting to give identification to these types of attacks. But the problem is that they're happening in such high volumes that many organizations aren't really focusing in those areas. I mean, we're obviously going to speak a little bit more to obviously how a threat actor would always try to hide their behavior, and especially an insider who's performing espionage would try to blend in and not do things out of anything abnormal. But what we have seen things like MSHTA and other things of that nature that are triggered, and it's quite interesting because in multitude of incidents over the past, even this past year, there have been cases where the business has had concerns with, is this individual the actual proponent or propagator of this problem, whether it is brute force attack into servers or anything of that nature. And they are, it's interesting because at least in our data set, and Lindsay could speak to this as well, but we can see that the person's actually not even logged in. There is no actual interaction on the device in terms of what we call window activity. So somebody is, what are they doing? What are they looking at? Are they shifting from Outlook to, Chrome to this or that? What we do see is a lot of, in some cases, network interface change activity. If the Wi-Fi is compromised, we see, just abnormal activity in the background. And there's usually a steady stream of a baseline, whether it is servers, whether it is workstations. There's a clear consistency that's going on there in the background. And through our anomaly detection, at least we do see those anomalies spike, and that's actually how we've identified these things. So it's not just us hunting in the data. Actually, the model does identify this.
So you're seeing instances where an individual is appearing from a geographic environment or a virtual environment for which you were not expecting.
Exactly.
And so that could be instances of individuals selling their credentials, or individuals having their credentials compromised so that somebody is masquerading as a real employee or a real person with authorized access, but just instead of coming in from San Jose, California, they're coming in from Athens, Greece.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, and I was going to shamelessly plug our recent threat advisory that had just come out, actually, in terms of essentially looking at individuals even sharing accounts internally to a business. So,
sure.
Sometimes there's also the case where, by email accounts and that identification to a device, there's an abnormal amount of email activity with regard to multiple identities, right? And that has led to identification of people side gigs, obviously compromise or sharing accounts and assets and things of that nature.
You know how to set up a topic, Amma, because nation states and espionage are using more and more of the technique of side gigs.
Yep.
And let's talk about what you're seeing. It's a topic I've written about a great deal. In your report, you talk about the use of LinkedIn, the use of the what is it? The 1,000
talents.
Thank you, 1,000 talents program.
Yep.
Which if you search that in Chinese, in China, they have a webpage that explains it in great detail about how it came to be in 2008. And last time I looked at the calendar, that was 16 years ago. Yeah. And so this is not new. They have been at it for a little bit. And if you look even further back to the program 863, that meant 1986 March. They started this event. So let's talk about what you're seeing from your customers, because the government of the United States, the government of the United Kingdom, the government of France, the government of Germany and Australia have all put out warnings about how social networks are being used, specifically LinkedIn, to spot, assess, and develop relationships for the purposes of nation state espionage. Indeed, the United States and Australia have put out training videos that are readily available to everyone about how this modus operandi works. And if you're not satisfied with that, you can go to China and watch their videos. They created a whole cartoon stream over the course of a couple of years that talk about the same thing about those foreigners that come to China and go to tea houses and make relationships with people with access to intellectual property. So I want to hear what your customers are sharing, because that's not what we're hearing in the courts. Because what you see in the documents in the open source is revelations that are being prosecuted. We're rarely seeing revelations on investigations before they get to that law enforcement prosecution.
Yeah, I think something interesting to even call out before is, although AI and the capabilities and functionalities that are coming out allow for specific targeting, and that's how we think about it. Oh, you can really make a clean message that's targeted to a specific company, which definitely, it will happen and does happen. Actually, there's more spray and pray that's happening, right? It's very, everyone's getting.
That's important that you say that again. Spray and pray.
Yes.
Meaning the adversary is just doing a shotgun blast and hoping they hit something that's worth something.
Correct. Whoever bites.
And then it falls down. Got it.
And I'll add to that. I think the reason why that's still happening is because they're obviously seeing clear results. They're seeing very clear results.
Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of
low cost, high return.
100%.
And this is I'd kind of add to that point. So, sorry to interrupt, Arman. That notion of these kind of targeted social engineering attacks is very different to this spray and pray approach. So when we think of the 1,000 Talents program, the tools and techniques that we see is just regular old-fashioned talent recruitment. Outreach across a wide array, not just targeted organizations or targeted companies. We've seen a huge volume of outreach towards our companies in Australia, our companies in the US, our companies in Canada, where they're engaging individuals to share information and work alongside and help what to some might seem a just cause as well. So this is actually very different to the targeted approach that we've seen of social engineering, where we see some foreign entities take a very sophisticated and targeted approach at some of our organizations. But that spray and pray approach is quite different from an indicator perspective. And when we look at that type of outreach, which is en masse, some of our organizations have talked to, where in one organization I can promise the kind of monetary benefit of cooperation. Where you get some of our sophisticated organizations in the US, where many of our employees would clearly see that as recruitment and not want to take the funds, where in other countries those funds can be extremely attractive and easy.
Raj, let me give you an example. Bangalore, India, right outside the headquarters of a multinational company, the Indian headquarters of this company, a competitor, which is backed by a nation state, put a hoarding up right outside the front gate. If you are a electrical engineer with computer science and are currently making less than this, you should talk to us. We'll triple your salary. Okay.
Yep.
When you're in an environment where I'm going to have a discussion to triple my salary, and then they would hire whole teams away and put them on sabbatical or put them to work, because when you're a competitor, when you can take somebody offline, you win.
You win. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It isn't always about stealing. Sometimes it's about stopping or destruction.
Yeah.
100%.
100%. And I'll probably segue you into a specific piece, which is our insider threat kill chain, Arman. I think the point at which DTEC sees this and the point at which our i3 team typically gets involved, we are not privy to the recruitment stages. There's other organizations in our companies that are deploying kind of open source intelligence feeds and others to help them identify which individuals inside the organization could be potentially being targeted. And sometimes we get access to that information about people that are more susceptible. You know, one of the organizations we've recently talked to is they identified individuals that were being targeted specifically because they were patent holders. You know, this is public information about employees that contain patents. But where we see, where we're privy to the information is really post recruitment. So individuals that really have engaged or are potentially already intentionally doing something bad within the systems because of that recruitment, or because they're already part of a program in which they're sharing sensitive information, sharing sensitive data with an organization with a foreign nexus, for example. I wonder if
Armand, before you start, though, I want to highlight something out of your report, and that is the percentage of cases that have been initiated coming out of human resources. That number startled me.
Yeah.
And I think it's germane to what you just said, Raj, which is that you're looking at it from a perspective of these folks are already engaged in malicious activity on purpose.
Yes.
We are not looking at people who are making administrative or policy mistakes. We are looking at people who are motivated, who are collaborative, who know exactly what they're doing. In the old parlance of spying, these are recruited assets who are responding to tasking in a manner in which is deleterious to their employer.
When people think about espionage and all of this, they really are ignoring the fact that they always think it's a plant, right? Somebody was trained in another country and put somewhere. That's not the thing today. Today's day and age, it's probably a 90-10 in the opposite direction, right? And I think to some cases that we've gone through, we're not as privy to the psychosocial activity, right? We're not privy to the background of what's the environmental factors, as MITRE would say, that have impacted somebody to make that decision. If it's financial, if it's health related, if whatever the case is. But 100%, it's interesting that the human sensor is still a big part of this, right? As MITRE would also say. So the feedback that comes from the community of people, hey, I saw Armand and he seemed a little disheveled today. He's on performance plan. He's not performing well.
Hey, that wasn't me that said that.
I know. It was Lindsay.
Guilty.
But that plays a big part in kind of triggering these investigations. Especially now, what's interesting is oddities on Zoom. People are communicating actually even more over Zoom and chat messages and all this stuff. And there's a social cultural norm in every business. And so people that kind of especially deviate from that, become a sore thumb really at the end of the day. But that, go ahead, Lindsay.
I was just say, I mean, a lot of times when I'm working with, clients and we're, conducting an investigation, as you guys said, we're again, not always privy to the why, they were socially engineered or why they agreed to do something, but we're able to use a lot of these data points that we're talking about to identify when things seem to go wrong or when things seem to change. And it does become an aspect of how can we tell when, this individual has actually changed their behavior for a specific reason, or if they're, slowly changing their behavior in order to potentially stay under the radar because they have been successfully socially engineered and they have been recruited in whatever means. So it's sometimes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that was a big question that I get from my clients is, what is the point in which we can, truly identify, when it becomes a serious issue? And it's sometimes difficult to tell at that point.
We've written about this on your DTEX blog, and that is the importance of the employee assistance program, for example, is an early warning indicator that somebody is having difficulty in life. There's also an individual doesn't normally go to work saying, how can I screw my employer over?
No.
There has to be an outside element pushing it. And sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's revenge. I got passed over for promotion. I am the smartest person in the room. They just don't realize this. I'm going to show them. They have demonstrated something elsewhere. And Raj, both you and Armand spoke of this a couple of years ago with me about if somebody is doing something wrong over here, they're probably doing something wrong over here too, in the accounting world, in this world, in that world. And I personally, I think you hit it in your report nicely in saying education is such a powerful lever in countering this, because you need to educate people that there's nothing wrong with saying Joe here needs help.
100%.
I see something. Joe here needs help. It is not saying I think Joe is engaged in espionage unless you actually, you see him taking screenshots with the camera and putting the camera back in their pocket and walking away. Okay, that's activity that's kind of off the wall and won't be detected by your sensors. But
Exactly.
if they're just acting out of norm, they could have a life change, going through a divorce. They could have somebody that, they're on the brink of bankruptcy because they're in the United States and somebody got sick in their family. There's all sorts of logical reasons for people to be acting abnormally and on the brink of crisis, that if there isn't someone who steps up and says, we're here to help you, will go about trying to find their own solutions.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And that's, that perception, and that's part of, a couple of years ago when the moniker insider threat started to be replaced with insider risk. And I think
so important.
This whole changing of that mindset, that by flagging behavioral change or an individual that potentially needs assistance or is behaving outside of the norm, can very much be there for the assistance of that individual. And we also see this, from a foreign interference perspective. There are certain individuals within our company that are more susceptible for targeting. And, I take the patent holders as an example. Those are individuals that are extremely important to your company from a development of IP, but that has put a target on their back because they're going to be outreach. And that training, that education, that's almost the same indicator as somebody that has maybe failed a psychological evaluation. We don't need to know the reason.
An example from my own experience in the competitive intelligence world, where an individual was unceremoniously let go, and it was just butt ass ugly. But they had a 2-year non-compete. Well, at the end of the 2 years, to the day, a competitor hired them. This person, who was loved by their team, made 6 phone calls. The entire team packed up the next day and went to work for the competitor. You could see it coming 2 years ahead. I got a call saying, how did they know to hire these people? And I said, let's walk back and look. And so many activities that take place inside a corporation, nobody remembers because there's such turnover in corporate memory. In the nation state world, those memories tend to be documented and live on. But let me segue, if I will, to, I think, one of the most important parts of this report as we come near the end of our time, and that is your offer and your outreach to increase and the strength of public-public and public-private collaboration in the insider risk management arena. I'd love to have your closing thoughts on this.
100%.
And your invitation to collaborate.
Yeah, and what we've seen is part of the tactics being employed by our adversaries is the tooling, the capability for social engineering, this ability to perform these kind of spray and pray attacks on our organizations has put our critical infrastructure organizations in particular at a really big disadvantage. And without more collaboration across industry, where we're seeing one or telecommunications organization and another telecommunications organization in completely different countries are having the identical attacks in terms of talent recruitment and others. Without that collaboration and that sharing, we're at a really big disadvantage. So you'll see on the final pages of the report, and let me share my screen just to kind of dive into a few of the initiatives that we'd love to bring attention to the audiences as well. I'm just going to share my screen quickly and come to one of the kind of call outs at the end. There's an invitation to collaborate at the end, if you see on some of the final pages of that report. But there's a number of center of excellences that have been stood up and are being stood up across the Five Eyes countries. You know, one of the first ones I'd like to kind of call out was the Australian Insider Risk Center of Excellence, and this is a not-for-profit organization that was established really for sharing best practices, specifically targeted at critical infrastructure. And in Australia, we've been lucky enough where critical infrastructure organizations of a national significance were identified, and we've had policies and mandates around insider threat that have been brought on those organizations. And many of those organizations put their hands up and said, we're pretty new to this. We've got an immature posture. I need help. And the best place to go for help was actually other peer organizations. And you know, DTEX was lucky enough to have some influential customers in those spaces that had, you know, more advanced programs than others. And we were finding ourselves facilitating and joining these dots between these organizations. But it was through these kind of not-for-profit organizations that we found that those connections could be accelerated, and that collaboration really accelerated over the last 2 years. So we've now seen an Insider Risk Center of Excellence stood up in Canada, and recently it was announced a Center of Excellence in the United States as well, even though there are many different organizations and groups that already exist that are collaborating fantastically, like Carnegie Mellon's OSIT working group, the FSI SACs, and there's a range of different initiatives in the United States, especially in federal and defense. But this brought together a lot of those different initiatives under the one not-for-profit umbrella, which would then connect those like-minded organizations in a protected way. So, you know, we see this invitation to collaborate really important. As we mentioned, you know, DTEX is not an expert on foreign interference. We're an expert on what insiders are doing on internal IT systems, and we can bring those indicators back in. But without that collaboration, we were seeing a big gap in this market. So, you know,
So it sounds like what you are successfully doing is showing your customer set that they can cooperate with their competitors and still be competitive.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, you know, we invite and we work alongside our competitors as well. So, you know, from a DTEX perspective, our motivations behind this are really to draw more attention to the problem. And we see, you know, you can see, like, we were out at the Insider Threat Summit in Monterey just a few days ago, and you can see our industry is actually pretty small. Like, skilled insider threat practitioners compared to the wider cybersecurity industry are tiny in number. And there's benefits to that because we're small enough.
So is the amount of money being thrown at it.
Exactly. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I think working together to kind of shed light on this problem, especially for our board members, our CIOs, our chief risk officers, to say this is a problem that needs better investment from a skills, from a technology, from a process perspective. And we see that kind of rising tide lifts all boat approach. We can collaborate with our competitors too. If we have one of the best technologies at the end of the day, so be it. If we're not, then another vendor is going to be successful. But I think we need more attention in this space in general.
The Miracle on 34th Street had that as its theme, if you'll recall. If Macy's didn't have it, then Gimbel's down the street might have it, right? And
yes.
The idea was the customer needs to be satisfied. In your state, it's the customer needs to be protected. It's universal. I love it. I love the fact that giving will in turn give you returns. And I'm not speaking financial returns. What I'm speaking of is it will rise. It will cause the tide of all to rise. It will also help in that public-private partnership where the public sector, the governmental entities have such vast amounts of information, but they don't have the avenues that allow the sharing of information in a manner in which it can be used without having these special caveats. And if all the information you give me is secret and I can't do anything with it, why are you giving it to me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Where if you DTECs are sharing information you learn in the aggregate and others in the same sector are, then customers can have data to work with. Whether or not they have the analysts, the know-how, and the brains to do something with it, that's a different question. But the fact of the matter is, DTECs is putting the information on the table for it to be used.
100%. And that's probably a segue, Arman, to the threat advisory. So we started to produce a number of threat advisories, some of which the high-level information we share with a wider audience, and some of the granular information about those indicators we don't share in a public audience. We share within a trusted practitioner group, but on purpose, we're not sharing those indicators. Can you talk to those advisories and that initiative and how that might fall into some of these centers of excellence, Arman?
100%. I think the reality is kind of Chris nailed it on the head too. Do you have the resources that are knowledgeable enough to actually address this, right? There's a lot of people that can use external threat tools, put the name in there, insert it, and off they go. But this is a different mindset. It's a different space, right? And there's a lot more behavioral analytics and other pieces that come into play. The gap that we want to really close globally is really the knowledge of why is this indicator valuable? What is the background of this operational scenario, for example? How do I actually communicate this to the business? There's other pieces at play. Is there a policy even in play that in this business that I can use to point against to say this shouldn't happen, right? There's a multitude of different factors. So every 4 to 6 weeks, we put out a new threat advisory on a new kind of critical topic that Lindsay's team is identifying in the field that's really providing operational value and intent. And really, we have to your point, we have you have to lift the tide together. It's not just one boat that rises the tide.
Perfect.
So, it's really critical that we do this. And this is one of our initiatives that we do have, to really educate, and it's also hard. There's hundreds of things. So when something does happen, how do I call against something? And this is kind of why we're trying to start to put out more of these threat advisories and as well as our framework and such. In an open light for folks to educate themselves and grow.
Well, I want to thank you all. Our time's coming to a close, and clearly we have 4 or 5 topics in here that we need to have sessions on each one of those.
Yes.
And dig
Yes,
a
we
whole
do.
lot deeper.
Definitely.
I would like to thank Raj, Arman, and Lindsay for sharing their knowledge, wisdom, and insights today, and their report. And for those of you who wish a copy of this report, click the link on your screen. And we will be pushing over for live Q&A when this is aired in April. I thank you ever so much. This is Christopher Burgess, thanking all of you for joining us for these conversations from the inside. Now go and have your own conversation. And thank you all very much for attending today's sessions. We have a number of questions that our panel is going to answer for you. The first question comes to us is, what is the breakdown of methods being used by insiders? Example, China, are they just paying people off mostly? While I have opinion on this, let's start with the two of you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times there's a multitude of factors. There's the payment aspect, there's career growth, there is, sometimes people doing things for their country, right? They're having a purpose. There's a multitude of factors that come to play in here. But Chris, I think you have even a longer history of understanding on the other side of the fold here. So I'd love to hear it from you as well.
Lindsay, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely, the most common thing that we do see is, you're getting paid to provide information. We'll pay you this amount of money if you give us this type of information. Sometimes we don't necessarily might know exactly what, that payment is going to do for that individual.
sometimes they, like Armand said, they could be just helping their country. In other instances, they're going to go after you because maybe you've had some sort of loss in your family, or maybe you've gone through something, and they target that. So a lot of this involves social engineering, as well as kind of finding the right people. On top of that, the other side of the coin is what we're seeing these other countries do, or these nation state actors, is they're just bombarding as many people as they can just to see who's going to bite. So they're sending off all of these different, messages, emails, whatever it might be, on a multiple different of means, but just trying to see they're kind of dangling that carrot and trying to see who's going to pick up on it. So
Well,
yes, there is a lot
I
of,
think you have it right there. They are
Yeah,
looking
exactly.
for the person that's hungry. They're looking for the
Yep.
person that might be interested. I might add that when those who are in sensitive positions, and I'm speaking specifically of government positions where national security is involved, and they advertise such on social networks such as LinkedIn, where we're airing today,
Mhm.
they're basically putting a target up as part of their profile to be identified by these nation states as someone which they will reach out and they'll tickle. I myself have fielded a number of invitations to speak at events, and some of them are legitimate, mind you, but go ahead and try to sort them for the average Joe. If you don't have a lot of foreign experience, isn't that easy? So the modus operandi I'm seeing and I'm writing about is they're using social networks to reach out and touch as many people as possible. They're using stolen and acquired email lists from company directories to do the same sort of thing. They'll send in a blast and see who's interested. They're using, as we spoke about today, they'll just set up outside of a company they're targeting and offer a job. We've got a job for you, and we're holding up a sign that says, make 3x your salary tomorrow by coming and joining us. So they're looking in a variety of ways to engage an individual. Now, while I think we all understand the mercenary side of the equation of I pay you money, you give me goods, they also have taken it to another level, which is I'll give you opportunity to advance your research and I'll fund your research. And now I'm hitting your intellectual ego of wanting to achieve my life goal of blah, 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 whatever it is, and doing it sub rosa. So your current employer doesn't know that you're moonlighting, and you're moonlighting in exactly the same field, so that you're essentially, even though in your mind you're not sharing anything but what you know is actually owned by your employer and not by you, because you created it on their dime. This is a nuance that many people miss, but all of us who sit in the insider risk management arena fully understand that when employees or individuals in positions of trust want to take information, they're normally taking information they think they own because they help create it.
Exactly.
Am I right on that?
No, that's definitely right. I mean, we have a lot of instances where, hey, I wrote this code, or I created this project, I did this, so it's mine, I can take it with me. But in reality, you more than likely created that code or wrote that project, whatever it might be, for a specific purpose for the company you work for.
Sure.
So again, and on top of that, how did you create that code? How did you, come up with those ideas? You were using company resources that you're getting paid to do those things. So yes, you might have been part of the process of the creation, but doesn't necessarily mean that you own it. And a lot of times, like you were talking about a second ago with the incentives, these people are giving more incentive to say, well, I'll give you your own research facility. I'll give you your own rights to all of your things, as long as you do this, this, and this for me. So again, they're increasing the incentive, but they're also playing on those blind spots that people have.
I think the key indicator for all who might be approached is there a desire to keep the relationship quiet? If that is the case, you have a really easy way to filter through that. Is this is really interesting? Can you give me more information so I can submit an application to my employer to take part in this external activity. That normally will shut it down immediately if it is not legit. If somebody is asking you to come to a conference and consult and they want you because of your position, your employer is going to back that if it's in their interest. That's a legitimate and logical conversation to have. But if somebody wants to keep it sub rosa, then you have to ask yourself, do I want to keep this sub rosa? Because they have resources that you as an individual don't. Let me move on to the next question, which is, what part of the kill chain is being attacked most often or is the most vulnerable? I can't answer that question, so I'm going to absolutely defer to the two of you.
Yeah, go ahead, Armand.
Is being attacked. Yeah, that's an interesting phrase.
That wasn't very big, but it hurt a lot.
Yeah, in terms of what we're and maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, so apologies for the folk that asked it. But I think it's important to note that from an investigative perspective, what are we looking for? And in many cases, as we were kind of alluding to earlier, people are often trying to blend their activity, right? And so what we're looking for is, especially earlier on in the actual kill chain, to see, well, what are they doing from a reconnaissance perspective? Because sometimes that's all you can really get if they're really trying to blend in. They're trying to be as normal as possible. Circumvention, again, obfuscation is always a big one, right? People covering their tracks if they are doing something. So it's earlier in the kill chain that we really want to look for things, because everyone, especially dependent on your business type, are you very innovative or are you very compliant driven? If you're very innovative, you probably do have a lot more personal webmail going on. You do have a lot more data movement in and out of the business, so people are going to try to use and abuse the common ways that then are kind of, at the end of the day, I don't want to use this term loosely, but mind numbing to the investigative team, because they are constantly seeing thousands of those things. And so, you will be one of many rather than one of one. So it's really important to kind of take that into case. But I'll lastly add, I think for businesses, as we do move forward over the next 5 years, if not and further, organizations are becoming more and more aware that corporate policy and governance is really critical. Whether you're innovative or compliant, driving that culture and establishing these norms, swim lanes, as we like to call them, are critical for businesses to actually be able to address these things and identify things, right? And let people know what they expect of them. And so then that's more definition of normal to obviously identify what is outside of normal. So I don't know, Lindsay, if there's more you want to add to that.
It's a bit of a like you said, challenging way to phrase the question, but I think there are certain parts of the kill chain that we try and look for and try and hone in. Like, at the end of the day, if exfiltration has happened, that it happened. What are we going to do about it? The way to go about it is to look at what happened before the exfiltration, what the user was doing prior to, taking data, sending it to a USB. So again, you kind of hit on it, talking about the reconnaissance or the obfuscation pieces. Those are the types of, triggers or behaviors that I want to look for in a user, especially if there's other things that are coupled alongside that. Say they're looking for a job, or they are reaching out to, a recruiter or whatnot. They're doing something, or something in their life, something in life has happened to them. You know an event that has negatively impacted their life. So those other factors contribute and kind of add to the suspicion of, now all of a sudden we see increased data aggregation. We see increased, data research or reconnaissance, like we talked about before. So it's not really about that one piece of the kill chain is being attacked, but it's more about what pieces of the kill chain to focus on in order to be more preventative.
Well, thank you. Next question is about what industries or sectors are most impacted by what type of threats. Now that's pretty broad. So let me break it down a little bit for you and hone it in. Which sectors in your report are we seeing having the most nation state and foreign attention? And what type of threats are being manifested from the risks that you are seeing and advising the customers about?
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to go first, I can go first, Lindsay, on that.
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, Obviously, I think big one is tech and telecom, pharmaceutical. I mean, you know, some foreign entities have kind of outlined exactly what they're going for, you know. But again, it is still a spray and pray, right? I think shotgun methodology, whatever information we can get, we're going to grab it. There's also a consideration for anything supply chain, manufacturing, because they're the ones that are also feeding other large entities and businesses in some facet. So
Mhm.
vendors are still a big target as well.
Mhm.
You know, and with vendors,
Who can't remember the compromise of all those point of sales machines by compromising
Yep.
the company that provided them?
Mhm.
exactly.
You got everybody's.
You're not just attacking one, now you get to attack them all because
Yeah,
you've
or you
attacked
only had to
them.
attack one to harvest them all.
Yes, yes.
Yes. And I'll say too, from what we're noticing, it's not just a theft, it's an intelligence gathering. I think there's a kind of a difference to be made here. People are moving data, taking data, doing things, but especially what we're seeing is an intelligence gathering. Somebody as well is going from business to business for short periods of stints of activity in their job role, you know, 6 months to a year here, then there. You know, and they kind of have what seems to be a legitimate background of activity and history in terms of university and education. But they're the ones that are going from place to place gathering intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And it's an intelligence long-term game, not a short-term gain and game. They're going for the long term, right? What's the
Mhm.
next 10,
The
20, 30
countries will
years?
be around forever. The
Exactly.
companies might not make it to the next quarter.
Exactly. And
Right.
I think the last thing I think is important to note here, just a side note of this question, we're all focused on the what's the 1 to 2 year impact, but when you think about someone getting intelligence about a certain project, you know, a business is not going to see that impact for 2, 3, 5 years, and you know, and until a random competitor comes out, or whoever they are, with a brand new product, right? And that product is slightly better than the one that they were coming out with, and now their loss of 20 million, 30 million, or you know, brand recognition, awareness, all that kind of stuff. So you know, anybody is still a target at the end of
Mhm.
the day.
Exactly. That's a great answer, Emma.
Yeah.
Lindsay, you have something to add, or
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna kind of go from the perspective that it's a lot of times we come across interesting use cases, and a lot of when you have, say, one, you know, business is affected, there's that same sort of attack or that same sort of incident is happening across all of the businesses within that industry. So
Mhm.
once one telecommunications company is targeted, they're all being targeted. So it's interesting enough to see if, you know, you have this idea of collaboration and information sharing, you know, that, you know, we're starting to promote, and it's looking towards, all right, you know, this communications company has been targeted with this attack. How do we then look further to the other communications companies in order to either be preventative there, or try to understand exactly what worked here and what didn't work there? What are they doing in here that stopped the attack, and what could they be doing better in order to prevent it in the future?
I think that is an excellent point to end on, because if competitors cannot cooperate with each other, they are going to sink individually due to the hand of the nation states, as opposed to strengthen collectively and
Mhm.
continue to be competitive. This is where these public, private, and organizations such as the new one that's been set up here in the United States are so important in the insider risk management arena. I want to thank you for joining me for around the second part of our program today. This
Yep.
has been really great. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. And we ask that you go out and have conversations with your own groups about what's important. So for Conversations from the Inside, I say thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.